Let's start, Jen, by talking a little bit about the themes that have followed you to where you are now, these threads that you've pulled over the course of your life, and then we can dive into how they're evolving and may continue to evolve. Because these two words, when I first met you, oh my goodness, I don't know, it's like 10 years ago, I want to say, like 8 years ago, 9 years ago. Let's not. Two words that were really prominent in your thinking when it come to how you wanted to invest your professional resources were the term leadership and equity. You were specifically focused on gender equity at the time. And when you were looking at leadership, you were looking in corporate environments majoritively at that time. So tell us a little bit about first what connected you to those topics. Like, what is it about who you are and where you see yourself contributing in the world that led you first to zone in on leadership and equity practices?
Yeah, I think it goes back to when I first, early in my career. And early in my career, you always feel almost there's a little bit of a sense of, not having all the tools you need to be successful, and the pressure of having to prove yourself. And I started out in venture capital, a male-dominated industry. And I immediately, from the very beginning, started to see the inequalities, but also at the same time was young and trying to, get a grip on, what do I want to do in my career and how do I evolve it? And there's one event, and I reflected back on that recently, or it was thinking about it in terms of what I wanted to do next, where, I was given an opportunity at the time to, with no education yet, full education, to be able to go into a large accounting firm. At the time, it was Arthur Andersen, and meet with all of the different partners, because I had developed the specialty of writing business plans, and in order to do that, you have to understand all the elements of the business. But I had a way of being able to connect with people to be able to get that information out, and I started to learn. And so I remember going through the process, going downtown Toronto, meeting with every single partner of the firm, and it was all going well until I met with this one gentleman. And this stood out for me as what not to do in leadership, and also the inequalities. And, I remember being in the boardroom with him and him saying to me, so, what makes you think without an MBA that you can even do this job? And I had been doing this job. I had been doing it at a smaller venture capital firm, and I had been successful and had raised millions of dollars. But yet those words immediately made me feel like kind of crawl back. I didn't attend any of the other meetings and said, okay, maybe I'm just going to stay where I am. And it was at that point where I realized the importance of academia. So I've always been striving so much to, make up for the fact that took me longer to finish school, and then still in school, but that also the recognition that you can, if there was a different leader that showed up that day, that could have maybe been a spark that inspired me to go for it. That, there was maybe some, natural qualities that I had to be able to pick things up quickly and to learn. And the fact that maybe I didn't come out of an MBA school at that time. I did go and obtain one. I think maybe because I felt like I needed it, but after finishing it, I didn't.
Many people find that with a lot of degrees. But it's interesting what you're saying too around leadership, because the first thing I think as an educator as well is like, that's teachers. Like teachers, the story that you just told about, what if I had met somebody in that room and they had really inspired me? They had believed in me. They saw me. They encouraged me, right? And then you have the flip side of a human being that discourages you or chastises you or stigmatizes you or discriminates against you. And you can have that in the education space, and that can make all the difference. Having those pivotal leaders, whether they be teachers, accountants at firms, or, these leaders present themselves in so many different facets of our lives.
And then, when I was given the opportunity to be a leader and to take on, go into organizations where, had an amazing group, but that there was definitely when I first went in, there was challenges. There was an environment where people were scared and didn't want to innovate because they were afraid that they were going to be chastised. Or, when I had that opportunity to be the leader that I wish I had or
Mhm.
seen throughout my beginning of my career, it was like so rewarding. And I think that's what you want to do, for me, at least in my career. It's not so much the specifics of what I want to achieve. It's more that I want to be able to have a purpose and feel like I'm helping others achieve what they want to achieve. And there's so much like great success that comes from watching others that naturally as a leader you'll see the results as well.
Yeah, and I always feel that it's this cycle that teaching and learning, mentoring, we are constantly learning from and teaching others. I'm always a student. I'm always a teacher. Some might call me a leader in some of those spaces. Some might call you a mentor in some of those spaces. But at the end of the day, it's giving and receiving, right? Time, energy, effort, information. And I really respect, I came later to sisterhood. Like I went to an all-girls school in high school and all throughout my primary, junior, and high school experiences. And there was a lot of bullying that I experienced from women, that girls, that really scarred me in terms of the kind of competition that we have and how we want the power dynamics within female relationships.
Yeah.
And so I am now, I'm 42 years old. And I would say it wasn't until, my 30s that I really connected to the power of sisterhood and women coming together for women. And that there is this very unique, I also was confronted very head on when I was traveling and working and living on the African continent, in Southeast Asia. There are many communities around the world where women are not only a source of support, but a primary source of support that I never really had encountered. How did you, so this, what I'm hearing from you is that it was through experiences that you had as a woman that connected you to want to support other women in mitigating some of the trials and tribulations that you faced professionally.
Yeah, and I would say it's not just women, that it's anybody, because I wanted to see, when I lead a team, I want to make sure that I get the best of everybody. But yeah, definitely women, because, and from the perspective of, I think things have changed a lot, and as much as they've changed, there's still those foundational issues that you see time and time again. And like you talk to, if you speak to any woman that's gone through particularly certain industries, like they all have the same life experiences, and they've all experienced it at some point where they've met that, they've come up against that one or two different leaders and felt, they haven't got the level of support that they need to, or that they deserve. For me too, like it was an evolution of, I also kind of experienced the competition of women not supporting women, and seeing like that doesn't make sense to me either,
Yeah, the
and
competition.
yeah. And it's like, why? Like, we should be all, supporting one another. And in fact, like, I remember times in my career where I would be like, I have to watch my back. Maybe I don't say as much to some of my female colleagues as some of them. It's just
Yeah.
personality. So I think every person has a different personality, and you could be supportive if you're a male or a female. But for me, it was, definitely some of the past. Then seeing what I love and get really excited about is like finding a problem and trying to figure out a new solution to it. And for me, it was like, why is it that we're like publishing, you see these in the academic journals, you see it in the newspaper, everything, you hear companies talking about it, they want to close the gender gap. Well, why are we not closing it? Because it doesn't, what are the core foundational elements that are making us really not be able to get there? And so that kind of drove me to like want to really dive deeper into and I think it's a lot of like the checkbox mentality of,
Mm.
and I mean, I worked in government a lot, so I understand that because government is all about checking the boxes and making it look like you're doing something and you're achieving things when you're really not.
Hmm.
And or that you are kind of, but not really.
Yeah, the accountability piece is the critical
Yeah.
element. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I always I've always gravitated to that and to try and understand what is it that we can be doing differently. And I think at the heart of it, and even now as we're moving towards this new normal of the hybrid workplace, what I'm really finding is that one of the key words is intentional. And I
Mm.
think you have to be very intentional about your career. You have to be empowered and take control of it because somebody else is not going to do it for you, and you're not going to break through the glass ceiling if you don't aren't strategic about it yourself. Because there's no there's some companies that are doing it well, but it's still like relies on you to be able to just have the confidence to just, you know, navigate it and not be worried that you're going to make mistakes along the way.
Well, let's double click on that for a second, because I think, in different conversations I've had around the education sector, we talk about students and how students, we're looking to have students take more ownership of their learning, that at times it can be almost that we're producing societies of people who are quite fragile, not as resistant, or, we talk about the anti-fragility framework a lot in some of these conversations. And so when we think of that level of responsibility that we have, so we've talked about leaders, the role that leaders can play in terms of influencing us, supporting us, discouraging us. But it's also really important that we think of those internal factors, right? Like, how do I, as an internal person, navigate professional environments, whether it's corporate, government, wherever we are? How do I cultivate a sense of, you've said words like empowerment, confidence? I approach it from a systems change perspective and teaching and learning. I think of skills, right? Like teaching people skills, equipping them with skills. Some of the skills that are critical to what we're talking about here, I would think would be self-awareness. Like, you don't know, you need to know yourself. You need to know, what are my default patterns? Like, why does that person trigger me? Or why do I really desire that thing over there? Like, what is it about me that drives me, some of my characteristics and patterns? Then I have to also have a sense of self-love that's like,
Mm-hmm.
those patterns are okay. Like, I not only have to see myself, but I have to accept myself, if not celebrate myself. What has been your journey in that process, and how do you feel we need to be approaching that kind of skill development? Maybe for women specifically, I do feel, and I'm sure there'll be people who comment and say, Michelle, this is not true, and someone will quote neurobiology to me or something, but I do feel that there are often gendered patterns where these two things, women are notoriously less likely at celebrating themselves and more likely to be the person in the room who wants to make sure everyone else is okay. Like, I'm sure sociobiologically we raise children. I don't know, but there is, if you look across, we've worked in a lot of different environments over a lot of different years together. You just see that trend, right? So what
Yeah.
you've just said is, it's super important to be able to stand up for yourself, to feel empowered. But I'm just like, how do we do it, Jen? How do we do it?
Yeah.
Because it seems like we're already at a bit of a disadvantage biologically. And when I have tried to do that in the workforce, I have been labeled often as being threatening, like being aggressive or being threatening, or when ultimately I'm just trying to hold space for myself.
Yeah. I think I do believe that naturally we are more caring. I mean, and maybe it comes to the point of, for example, even children, right? Like, we're the ones that have children, and like they've been with us for 9 months. We're connected. As soon as they come, you just, when I know for me, when I had my first child, I didn't want anybody to hold them. And it was like, I'm like, I'm protecting him. Like, I'm guarding with my life. Like, okay, it's okay. You can let him go. You can have a shower. And like, I had a quick shower, and then I'd be
Yeah.
like, okay, now give him back, you know?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's like, it is that protecting, but I feel like, I think it's something that people struggle with. It's funny because you think, oh, well, when I'm older, I won't feel this way. But yet I've never not felt this way of like a self-doubt in some areas. And I think that's why you always have to realize you're never going to wake up and feel older and like, no self-doubt, right? And if you do, then you're not pushing and trying to achieve what you really can achieve. So you have to do things that scare you all the time. And I think that you have to understand who you are and that you can achieve whatever goal you look. I put goals, I had cancer when I was young. I was 16, 17. I got pregnant at 18, had him at 19. That's crazy, right? And that was a lot of struggle and challenge. I look at my 18-year-old now and think, oh my God, I would like, how was I even ready? And so, I think when people go through that diversity and that realizing that you're in that case, I didn't have a choice of, for example, do I take this stretch project or not? It's like, no, you're having that baby and you're 19. And so you just have to figure it out. And so if we take that stance of, well, we know we can take this new role, we know we can do it, you just have to figure it out, and realizing that it's okay to feel like scared, it's okay to not know what you need to do next, or
Mm,
realize that, but all you have to do is double down and figure it out. And I
mm,
think for me, that was where I started to realize I appreciate so many values in terms of the structure and some of the knowledge that you can get from academia. But at the same time, you also have to kind of be able to um, allow yourself to figure things out on your own, because that's when you might find new knowledge and new approaches, and then you build up this like strength where it's okay to, although I say like, I'm older now, but that I still get scared about certain things. There I also have less fear of just jumping in, because I realize, well, if it doesn't work, well, then I'm just at the same position as I am now. It's
mm.
there's,
Yeah. And there's the two things I think you're really highlighting, which are important, are the gauging of expectations. Like, I am who I am, and that's okay. Like, I feel like at times I suffer from bulimia and an eating disorder at a young age. And, this idea that, or, what I've heard about people who are in recovery from addiction, it's like, these are patterns. These are things that are in me, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing. Like, I'm not a bad person because I had instincts to self-harm as a child.
yeah,
The expectation I have of myself as I grow and I develop is not that I become a different person. It's that
mhm,
I learn new tools and strategies by which to manage my behavior, manage my emotions, navigate my self talk, speak to myself with more compassion and self love. And then the behaviors are different, right? So,
yeah,
gauging your expectations, you are not, there is nothing wrong with you unless you're a psychopath and you want to hurt people. Generally speaking, you're good, it's okay. But we want to grow and develop. We want to add layers to who we are, and add tools to our metaphorical toolkit as we age. And then you feel more confident, empowered to come out the other side of experiences and land on your feet, because the more you do that, the more you pattern in your brain that you do survive and everything doesn't fall apart, and you can do that on your own. And then I also think a really important thing, I was just at a conference too, and I was attending a women in leadership panel, and they were discussing that idea of like putting on that persona of I can do anything, taking that stretch goal, volunteering for that job, just take it because you can do it, like just jump in. But I think it's also important that we temper that in terms of, you don't need to be always the first person to volunteer yourself to prove the value that you have. And in the projects that you work on, asking for help is something that now
yeah,
more than ever in the leadership. I mean, I feel like that's happened post-COVID too, hey? Like, and especially I know, and we'll transition now to some of the work you're doing, the research, doctoral research you're doing on leadership in some of these hybrid workforces. I feel like so many people now are just more comfortable saying like, I'm not okay. Like I got a crying baby over there. My father-in-law is sick. Like I need a timeout or I need someone to help me. And that can be a sign of empowerment and strength as well.
So I think, you know what, I wish I had known that earlier in my career, that it was okay to ask for help, because I think that you feel like, and I think people still, based on, you know, even people I've interviewed before for my podcast, or even people that I'm interviewing for my study now that are younger, that there's still that sense that if I ask for help, it's going to look like I don't know what I'm doing. And that what, you know, you start to learn when you grow up and, you know, and you start to have more confidence, is that it actually is very appealing to the other person, because that's maybe your leader or a manager, because it provides that depth of, they see that you understand enough to ask smart questions, and that, you know, people want to feel helpful. And so like if you, I think it's all in how you ask. If it's like, well, I have no idea, like tell me, versus like I've you know, looked through this, these are some of my thoughts, I want to make sure I'm on the right track. Like and so I wish I had had that confidence to do more of that. And I think that COVID was amazing for really like allowing people to see inside your home, obviously, see the fact that you have sometimes chaos going on, but that's okay. And like also being able to ask, is it okay? Like, are you doing okay? Are you mentally doing okay? And I think that for women, and I don't think it's a stereotype, because I think, and maybe some women aren't like this, a lot of women are like this, where it's like they naturally reach out and say, like, they can sense this intuition's huge in leadership, and like nurturing that to be able to be like, okay, I can see, like, you know, the chaos behind, but I can also see from the facial expressions and the tone and everything that that person might not be okay right now. And just like having the strength to be able to ask, and then having the strength to be able to have somebody on the other side say, yeah, I need help.
Holding that space. You know what's I think is amazing is I think we're talking about the same quality and asking everybody, but specifically in terms of women being able to advocate and empower themselves, is this natural intuition or curiosity that many of us might have for others, turning that lens inward and having that same curiosity, compassion for what's going on in here. Instead of lying in bed reviewing your to-do list or saying, begrudging the things you didn't get done that day, as opposed to what you are. That's just part one of this exciting conversation, my friends. Click on part two and continue with us on this important journey we like to call the education revolution.